All right, well, I think we can go ahead and get going. We might have a few other folks joining us. Thanks so much, everyone, for who was able to make it tonight. We really appreciate you giving us your time this evening. We're hoping to do a fairly quick presentation and then have some time for just some conversation and questions and answers and comments. And so I think we'll go ahead and get going. So our agenda for this evening, we're going to just talk really briefly about Milwaukee's area of concern. We'll talk about the cleanup projects that are being planned, what you can expect, some next steps, and then we're going to talk a little bit about our Community Advisory Committee. So first up tonight, my name is Cheryl Nen. I am Riverkeeper with the Milwaukee Riverkeeper. And we are a small nonprofit organization in town, started in 1995 to protect water quality and wildlife habitat in the Milwaukee Basin. And you'll be hearing from me tonight, and you'll also be hearing from Heather Williams from US EPA. And Heather will join us in a couple slides here to discuss more about the cleanup projects that are coming up. And this is our contact information, and then you'll be able to see this again later. There we go. Okay, so firstly, I think everybody knows hopefully how to Zoom by now. We've had a couple years Zooming, but there should be a toolbar either at the top of your screen or at the bottom of your screen where you'll find the mute, unmute button and the camera buttons, chat button where you can put in questions to the host. And then there's also a place where you can raise your hand and do reactions. I don't think we're going to have any breakout rooms tonight, so that's not something that we need to worry about. And you can also change your screen view at the top right, either gallery view or speaker view. And so it'd be really helpful for us if you could rename yourself. And you should be able to do that by right-clicking in the top right box where your face is. You can also, if people could have their microphones muted, we'd really appreciate that. You can also keep your camera off as well until we get to the questions and answers session. We have a lot of people on the call, so it might help with some bandwidth here. So one of the new things that we're going to try tonight, and we're hoping it'll go well, is something called a Jamboard. And I don't know how many people have used these before, but in a few slides, we're going to be putting a link in the chat button, and you'll be able to go to a link, and the link is kind of will take you to this Jamboard. And so there's a bunch of different icons that are to the left, and I don't think it's going to let me, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but there's a pen option where you can actually write onto a board. It's a little bit harder to use, but you can write on the Jamboard itself. There's an eraser function. You sometimes might need to use the arrow to go from one kind of thing to another. And it's just a fun kind of tool that allows for a lot of different types of input. There's also the next icon down is a sticky note. So there's different color sticky notes, and you can type something on there and place it where you want on the Jamboard. Whoops. And the next icon is a picture. You can insert pictures. You can insert like a circle or a text box and then add text to that. So we're just going to try it. And then the other kind of important thing to know is at the top of the Jamboard where you see this little 1 out of 2, our Jamboard is going to have a different page, and each page will have a different question. And so we'll be just asking you some questions throughout the presentation. And if you think about it and want to go over there at some point and just add some thoughts or pictures or anything that inspires you, feel free to do that. We'd love to see what you want to tell us. Okay, so, oh, and I should mention too, the Jamboard, another cool thing about it is that it allows for anonymous feedback and more diverse feedback. And so we're really excited to try to use that tonight. Okay, so I think we're going to head on now to the bulk of the presentation, which is talking about the area of concern. And so again, thanks so much for everybody for coming. And I'll kind of beg your indulgence if you've seen this slide 20 times already, but this is a map of the areas of concern. And so what is that? It's essentially an area on the Great Lakes that has a history of significant environmental degradation. from human activities. And that really prevents us or prevents people from being able to fully use our natural resources for human activities. So it prevents us from being able to, swim and fish and enjoy our local waterways the way that we'd like to. And so the map that you can see on this screen is a map of the 5 Great Lakes and also the 31 different areas of concern. And this is, I should say, these are the 31 highly degraded areas on the US side of the border. And in addition to those 31, there's also 12 areas of concern on the Canadian side that aren't shown here. Wisconsin actually has 5 different areas of concern. One in the Lake Superior Basin, which is the St. Louis River, which is here. And then we have 4 additional AOCs in the Lake Michigan portion. So we have essentially the Lower Menomonee River, which you can see here, the Fox River, the Sheboygan River, and then the Milwaukee Estuary, which is the area we're going to be talking about tonight. And so in 2020, the Lower Menomonee River is the first Wisconsin AOC that was officially removed from the list of these degraded shoreline communities. And so that was really exciting. And I think all of the other AOCs are in different kind of levels of progress to cleaning up some of the contamination that have put us on this list. So we're here today to talk a little bit more about the Milwaukee Estuary and what you'll be able to expect in the next 5 to 10 years of work that we're hoping to do here. So the Milwaukee Estuary is essentially where all 3 rivers meet at Lake Michigan, and the blue shaded areas on the map here are kind of the watersheds or the sub-watersheds that are directly adjacent to the areas that we're going to be cleaning up as part of this work. And so essentially we have here, we have the Cedar Creek watershed, what we call the Milwaukee River South, the Menomonee watershed, and also the Kinnickinnic. And there are several other additional sub-watersheds north of here, the East and West Branch and the North Branch of the Milwaukee River. But the areas that we're really going to be focusing in on tonight are these yellow rivers. And so this is essentially the portions of waterways that are going to be cleaned up because we have high levels of historical contamination in these sections of the river. So essentially this is largely 2 counties. So we have Milwaukee County involved in this project and Ozaukee County. We have the 3 tributaries I mentioned, so the Milwaukee, Menomonee, and the KK. There are also a small portion of Cedar Creek that's downstream from the Superfund site in Cedarburg, which has already had some significant cleanup work. Cedar Creek is part of this. Lincoln Creek as well, which has had quite a lot of flood management and additional cleanup work. There's one large cleanup project that already happened in portions of Lincoln Creek in the Milwaukee River in Lincoln Park. And then we also have a portion of the Little Menomonee River downstream from the former Moss America and Kerr-McGee Superfund site up here. And let's see, we also have portions of the South Menomonee Canal and a little portion of the Burnham Canal as well. And then all in all as well, there's 13 different municipalities that are going to be involved in this work. So it's a pretty large effort that we're going to be taking here. All right, so this is the first exciting opportunity to use our Jamboard. So I think our friend Dave or someone's going to put in a link to the Jamboard in the chat. And so we really want you to think about the Milwaukee Estuary today and what it means to you. And so when you go to that Jamboard link, that will be the first question that you should see there on a page. And then by scrolling at the very top of it, you should be able to go to these 2 other questions. And one of them is, who can take care of this work, or who can take care of the estuary, like who's in charge of it? And then the last one is, how do you engage or use the Milwaukee Estuary right now? So are you out there in these areas of the rivers that we're talking about? How do you use them? How are you interacting with them every day? So you folks can do that right now. You can also do it later. I think we're hoping that people pay attention to the presentation, but we'll likely have those Jamboards open for some time. So don't feel like you have to run over there and fill everything out right away, but just kind of another way to provide input. I would say too, if folks don't want to deal with that, you can also feel free to answer any of these questions in the chat box, and we'll have folks that will copy and paste those answers onto the Jamboard later. And we're using it kind of also as some meeting notes Okay, so we'll move on to the kind of meat of the meeting, which is, how do we fix this area of concern? So if our goal is to clean up this area of concern, so the estuary is no longer on this list, how do we do that? So we need to address the core issues that are not allowing the public to fully use the water resources in a safe way for drinking and swimming and fishing, and being able to safely eat the fish that we're catching, or wildlife, ducks, other aquatic wildlife as well. So in general, there's 3 different objectives, the way that this work is being organized. The first is really cleaning up the waterways and improving water quality. And we're going to be talking mostly about that tonight. The other buckets that's important to think about are that we're also working on restoring fish and wildlife habitat and populations. And there's a lot of really great work that's happening there. And then also improving outdoor recreational opportunities like swimming, boating, and fishing, making sure that our swimming areas are safe to use. And so there's a lot of different details and projects that will be kind of contributing to us meeting each one of these objectives. And as I mentioned tonight, we're really going to be focused up on the cleaning up the waterways objective and addressing some of the work that we need to do to address, some of the overall goals as part of that program. So I want to talk briefly about the waterway restoration partners. And there's a website link here on the bottom and some of the logos of some of the partners that are part of this. But essentially, this is a large project in addressing these wide-ranging objectives, and accomplishing all the important work that's necessary to get us off this list of areas of concern. We can't do it alone. It requires a very significant level of collaboration and partnership. And so this Waterway Restoration Partnership has been created as a group of really long-standing partners in the community that have been working together for many years to clean up water quality. And so it's currently made up of some project sponsors, so landowners and government agencies, as well as non-governmental organizations, community organizations that are actively participating in this work. And so this represents over 150 individuals and 20 plus organizations that have been working on different work groups and working to, push this work forward. Some, probably going back to the late 1980s that have been working on cleaning up this AOC. So, we see that we have a real generational opportunity on the horizon to do something really impactful and important in the Milwaukee Estuary. And a lot of the organizations that you see here are formalizing this partnership and really doubling down to make sure that we are going to take, advantage of this opportunity and clean up this AOC for current and future generations. So the best way to kind of follow a lot of the work that will be happening, we're going to be trying to keep this website updated with, information on the projects and also ways that you can continue to stay involved in providing feedback. So that's just a good website to kind of bookmark and kind of visit regularly to kind of stay abreast of all of the work that's going to happen. So quickly, the Community Advisory Committee is a kind of one of the work groups of the area of concern. And essentially, we are a group of community members that are working to ensure that Milwaukee residents, and especially those that have been historically underrepresented or excluded from environmental decision-making, play a really active role here in making decisions about our shared waters, how the funding will be used. And, we really want to ensure that the voices and ideas of a broad swath of our community really inform this work going forward to the benefit of all of us. So we have a community advisory committee. If you go to that website that I just showed you, and don't worry, we'll have that in a couple other slides as well. You can go there too, and there's a special page that lists the Community Advisory Committee and who those folks are. And so you can feel free to contact any of us individually, and there's a few of us that are attending today. And then you can also use this informational contact and email info@MilwaukeeEstuaryAOC.com, and that will go to all of the members of the committee. And so kind of to that end, if folks are comfortable, we'd like to launch a few polling questions right now, just to get a sense of who's with us tonight in the audience. And these are just really basic questions about race and ethnicity, age brackets, and gender. So this is all anonymous. We just appreciate it because we do want to make sure that we're continuing, to reach out and reach the broadest, swath of the community possible. So it just helps us moving forward to make sure that we're doing this work, I think in a good way here. So we appreciate that. So we'll just leave that poll up for a little bit.
We're about halfway there. Keep going, everyone.
All right. So I think I can move on and we can still leave the poll open, yes? Maybe not.
We're about 75% there.
All right, I'll give people a couple. I don't think it's going to let me advance until the end of the poll.
It's kind of stalled, so I think I'll end the poll and everyone can check out.
Great, thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Awesome.
All right, there you go.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we appreciate that. Thanks so much for doing that. Let's see. Move on now. There we go. Okay. So we'll move on to the good stuff, which is how we're going to clean up this legacy of pollution that we have. So basically what's happening is that we, have years of heavy industrial use that have polluted our waterways. And so there's some really, spectacular old pictures of the rivers here in Milwaukee. But, we have a lot of toxic chemicals and heavy metals and other pollutants that are contaminating a lot of the sediments at the bottom of the river. Many of them have been there, for probably a very long time, from the very beginnings of the city of Milwaukee. And so, removing this toxic material, toxic muck is really going to make our waterways better for human health, and I think also for fish and aquatic life. And so that's kind of the really core of this work is, kind of addressing a lot of this legacy industrial pollution that's been with us, and in some cases way before we even had a Clean Water Act. So why are we doing this work? Essentially, we're doing this work because we want to protect our drinking water source. We want healthier fish and wildlife. We want to improve our economic and recreational opportunities as well as public safety. And so this is, a really, I think, huge opportunity for us to address a lot of different objectives, and to really, help protect Lake Michigan, which is our drinking water source, help improve our fisheries, and again, really protect public health and safety. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So why now? This work, has been in different levels of planning for decades, but we are at, I think a unique time and place where we have a lot of different partners and agencies that have come together and signed an agreement and are working to make this work a priority, really committing to see it through. And so in addition to that, we've been doing a lot of studies for many years. We also have some very good federal funding right now. And so there has been, for years, Legacy Act funding, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding, other funding that's been in place to do this work. But, we are expecting this work that we're talking about to cost, over $350 million. It's a lot of money. And, I think some folks might have seen I think it was last week, President Biden came out and announced that $1 billion of the infrastructure funding that has passed Congress will be dedicated to the Area of Concern program as well. So there's some very robust federal funding. And so we have a really good opportunity here to, finally be able to go and do a lot of this work. And so the reason too that we're not doing this as like a project by project approach, which we have, done to some level in the past, is that there's so much work that needs to be done that it was much more efficient to work together to streamline that work in terms of time and cost, and really to try to do as much of the work at the same time to minimize disruptions to residents and river users. And I think everybody working on these projects is very cognizant of that. So that is kind of why there's this big partnership that is formed around trying to get this work done. So just quickly, and then I'm going to pass it over to Heather. Where is this work going to take place? So essentially, it's going to take place on around 12 miles of the Milwaukee, Menomonee, Kinnickinnic, and some areas of Lake Michigan. So we'll see if I can get my cursor to work here again. So it's essentially 6.5 miles of the Milwaukee River. So downstream of the former Estabrook Dam to where the Milwaukee River meets Lake Michigan. We have about 2.5 miles of the lower Menomonee River from roughly around 25th Street down. About 2.4 miles of the Kinnickinnic River downstream from Chase. And there was a section between First and Beecher that had a big cleanup about a decade or so ago. But there is still some lingering contamination in that section that might be cleaned. Portions of the inner and outer harbor and near shore areas of Lake Michigan are being looked at as well. And the next river segment that probably will be cleaned up is basically the area of the Milwaukee River that's in the 3rd Ward. And so I think Heather will also be talking a little bit more about that. But this is essentially, and the yellow portions of the rivers are the areas that will be dredged. I think I also forgot to mention just the South Menomonee Canal and a little small portion of the Burnham Canal as well. Some of that cleanup has already taken place on the Burnham Canal. So I think with that, I'm going to toss it over to Heather Williams from US EPA to guide us through the next few slides.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Cheryl. And good evening, folks. My name is Heather Williams from US EPA's Great Lakes National Program Office. And I am the project manager from EPA on the Milwaukee Estuary Contaminated Sediment Cleanup Project. So how do we go about cleaning up this contaminated sediment in rivers and harbor areas and in lakes? We want to give you this general overview of ways to remove or dredge contaminated sediment. But I do also want to mention that as we are planning and coordinating to make this project happen, we will be giving you more information on exactly where we will be needing to do the cleanup based on the contamination and how we propose to clean it up specifically. And as we get closer to doing the work, more details on when we will be performing work in various areas. But for now, with this overview, there are 2 main types of dredging, and one is called mechanical dredging. And this is really similar to like a project on the water, barge out on the water, and with an excavator or a crane with a bucket that scoops the contaminated sediment from the bottom and pulls it up through the water column, brings it to the surface and puts it on a barge, and then is transferred to a processing facility or a management facility. So this is a very common method of dredging, and we may end up doing some mechanical dredging in Milwaukee. So really what we're seeing in our evaluation is based on the nature of this project, we'll probably be using the second main type of dredging. I'm going to go to the next slide for me, which is called hydraulic dredging. Cheryl, can you move that for me?
Yeah, I'm trying. Hold on for a second. Just a little sluggish here.
Oh, you're stuck on mechanical. There we go.
It's just really being slow on me for a second.
Okay. All right, so this is our other main type of dredging. It's called hydraulic dredging. You have a barge out on the water, but that equipment out there is essentially a very large pump. And that pump would have a cutter head that extends down to the contaminated sediment, and it acts like a vacuum, pulling the sediment from the bottom into a pipe. And then it's transferred through this pipe to a disposal facility or processing area. And this pipe can also be submerged so that it is not impacted by boat traffic. So both of these types of dredging have been implemented in Milwaukee at other projects. All right, I think we can move on to the next slide, hopefully. I should give you a few seconds warning. I think the next slide deals with how much material, I can start talking about it, are we talking about here? From our testing, we have discovered that yes, there is quite a bit of contaminated sediment in Milwaukee's waterways. But it is the aim of this project to address and clean up all of the remaining contaminated sediment in Milwaukee. So a substantial undertaking. We're removing about 1.5 million cubic yards of contaminated sediment. So a staggering amount, tremendous amount of material. And just to try and visualize that, if you took this football field and filled it up with mud and stacked that mud, 60 feet high, just a mountain of mud here, we'd have about 12 of those is what's equivalent to the amount of material that we are planning to remove as part of the cleanup. So next slide, please. So where will all this material go? The Dredge Material Management Facility, or DMMF, is really the key to this sediment project. We wouldn't be here planning it, or we wouldn't be able to implement this project without the Dredge Material Management Facility. So this is a sediment management facility that is to be constructed in Milwaukee to contain and safely store the contaminated sediment. Milwaukee does have its own disposal facility, existing facility, confined disposal facility, but doesn't have the capacity for this material, for so much material that we need to remove. So the Dredge Material Management Facility will be constructed as part of this project, and we will have additional meetings about the DMMF, as you'll hear it called, as we plan for construction. But in addition to being, as I say, key to making this project happen, it's saving money, it's reducing pollution from truck traffic. We estimate that over 146,000 trips by truck to landfills will not need to take place because we'd be able to place the material in the Dredge Material Management Facility. That's 6.5 million miles of truck traffic that will not need to take place. So where is the DMMF? We have a map to show you. This is an aerial view of Milwaukee. And the arrows on the bottom are pointing to the existing confined disposal facility. This is where the Lake Ferry Express is situated. And the DMMF will be constructed adjacent to the north of the existing disposal facility. So we can go to our next slide. When is all this going to take place? We have some estimated timelines, and these are our best estimate at this point. And this is some information about the actual construction, when you will see these things taking place. For the Dredge Material Management Facility, the best estimate right now is construction is planned for 2023, and that may spill over into 2024. And when will the cleanup begin? As Cheryl mentioned, one of the first areas you'll see is the Third Ward project on the Milwaukee River that is being handled by We Energies, one of our partners. And right now, the best estimate for this work starting is a year from now, in spring and summer of 2023. And we will have other opportunities. We'll be sharing information and other information meetings about that project over the next year. So the other cleanup work, most of the other sediment that we're going to remove will follow construction of the dredge material management facility. So starting in 2024, and it will take several years to complete the cleanup. So it's a little bit of our construction timeline. So we have, as you can see, starting in 2024, a lot of time to give you additional updates on the bulk of this sediment work. So I think with that, I'll pass it back to you, Cheryl. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, so what to expect? So, you know, how is dredging going to affect all of us here that live and work and recreate on and near the rivers? So, you know, the temporary impacts of dredging, you know, the largest one is going to include, you know, possible resuspension of sediment during dredging and the presence of marine, you know, equipment on the river, on the water, located in different parts of the estuary, depending on, you know, what portion is being cleaned up when. And so marine access at this time, you know, may be limited in certain areas where marine construction is happening. And there's already, you know, some ongoing conversations going on with those places where we think that you know, where there will be potentially impacts to marine access. But, you know, we really do expect, you know, there's enough room to share the rivers, even with this work going, you know, ongoing. And, you know, where those hydraulic dredges are going to be used, which Heather just talked about, you know, there are opportunities to sink those hydraulic pipelines underneath the water line. So that could really minimize, I think, any impacts to, you know, marine traffic and boating in the summer months when we all are out in the rivers. And this has been done in other AOCs and in other areas, you know, very effectively up in the Fox River and other locations. So, you know, I think that there's definitely top of mind, how do we minimize any impacts to people who are using the waterways? And I think as far as the specifics of the cleanup effort, you know, I think we still don't know a lot, as Heather mentioned, you know, how the work will exactly take place in different stretches of the river, you know, when it will be taking place, how the material will be moved to the DMMF, whether it's through the hydraulic dredge, or maybe there might be some areas where that mechanical dredging needs to happen. That's all still being kind of figured out right now. But, you know, as Heather mentioned, there's going to be ample opportunities to, you know, to continue to communicate with the public on the different phases of the cleanup as we kind of get closer to knowing what this is going to look like. But it is a very expedited schedule. It's really between now and 2027, as Heather just mentioned. So that's really, you know, a 5-year period of time to get a lot of contamination out of the water. You know, there could be some possible odors, noise, lights, you know, things that are different than normal, but we're really, you know, working hard to make sure that we can really minimize any impacts to the public and businesses as part of this. So again, cleanup results, what happens after the waterways are cleaned up. So, you know, cleaning up our waterways, you know, will help us protect Lake Michigan, which is our drinking water source. And, you know, ultimately, we also want to protect and improve our fisheries, make sure that they are safe, you know, for humans and other animals. We want to make sure that we're improving economic and recreational opportunities. And I think after the contamination is removed, the waterway restoration partners, so all of that long list of folks that are working on this, you know, are going to, once we have all of the contaminated sediment out, the focus really will be on restoring a lot of the ecology, trying to bring back some better habitat for fish and aquatic life, and, you know, trying to also improve some of the areas adjacent to the water, restoring any areas that were disturbed, that kind of thing. But, you know, the ultimate goal really is, you know, cleaner water, cleaner fish, safer places for families to play along the river, and, you know, improve quality of life for current and future generations. So, I mean, those are obviously very big goals, but I think it really does start with removing a lot of this contamination. And then once that is out of there, I think we can really build on adding additional community benefits at that point. So we're moving on to, I think, another opportunity for folks to play around on Jamboards. So we wanted folks to reflect about the Milwaukee Estuary, maybe in 10 years or 20 years when it's all cleaned up, you know, how would you like it to look like? How would you like to describe it at that point after the cleanup is done? So, you know, after the cleanup is complete, how might you use it differently? You know, would you consider doing activities or events that, you know, maybe you wouldn't consider doing today? So, you know, feel free to be aspirational there, you know, kind of be creative there in the Jamboards, and you can put pictures up and you can add comments and anything that you really want to. So there is kind of another thing that people can weigh in on. And as I mentioned before too, feel free to comment in the chat as well if it's easier for you. Okay, so next steps, as Heather mentioned, there's a lot of planning and coordination efforts going on, and for those different areas that we mentioned of the river that are going to be dredged. There will be, you know, many updates at future meetings, and we're going to tell you about a couple in a second here. And there, you know, we're really hoping to have many opportunities for public input. Hopefully some of those will be in person soon. We're also hoping to do maybe some fun outdoor activities as we start to get a little bit warmer as well, just to get people more familiar with the area of the cleanup and the different projects that are being planned. There are a couple different fact sheets. So there's a sediment cleanup, frequently asked questions, and another fact sheet, which I think someone's going to probably put the links in the chat for us. And as I mentioned before too, all of the information at this meeting and other meetings that we're having, you'll be able to find at that mkewaterwaypartners.org website as well. All right, so, and as I mentioned, we would continue to show you this website at every opportunity, but this is the website where we're going to, you know, try to keep everybody informed and of all of the news and events and public opportunities to stay involved. So if you have any questions that come to mind after this meeting, or, you know, even later, and that are more technical in nature, feel free to send those questions to Heather, who you've just heard from at EPA, and her emails here. And then also we have the contact information for Scott Inman, who's with us tonight from Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And Scott is doing a lot of great work on this project. So he can also ask a lot of, or answer a lot of questions, probably ask questions, but also answer a lot of questions that you might have. So feel free to send questions to both of them. And so as far as upcoming meetings, we're hoping to try to have continual meetings for the next few months. So we're planning an April meeting and a May meeting that will look at different geographies of cleanup, because the cleanup in the third ward is going to be very different from the cleanup in the Milwaukee River Greenway, which is essentially from the former North Avenue Dam through Lincoln Park area. So it's part of our Milwaukee River Greenway. And so those are just two examples of different portions of the river where we know, you know, there's going to be cleanup, and the cleanup will be probably quite different in both of those places. So we don't have those meetings set, I don't think yet, but we're planning them very soon. There'll be one in April and one in May. And then in June, we're also planning a more detailed meeting to go a little bit in more depth about the dredge material management facility, which is the facility that's going to receive a lot of those dredge sediments that we were talking about. And so if folks, you know, can kind of pay attention, I think we have probably people's email addresses too. If you let us add you to our list as part of registering for this meeting, you'll also get emails about future opportunities to being involved. So I think at this point, I am going to pass it off to Dave from our Community Advisory Committee, who's going to take us, I think, a little bit through, David Frazier. I'll let Dave introduce himself, and he'll just take us through a little bit, some of feedback that we might have gotten on the jam boards, and also just kind of moderate next steps here as far as comments and questions. So Dave, I'll pass it off to you.
Great. Thank you both, Heather and Cheryl. I appreciate everyone for being here, taking the time to join us. As Cheryl mentioned, the Community Advisory Committee is really the voice of the community to help the process and the cleaning. And so this Jamboard experience tonight, we're using as an example and a pilot to see if this is another way to get and continue to get input from you all. So thank you for those who have posted, and we appreciate those comments. We've also had a number of comments in the chat, and I've moved those over when I could to over the Jamboard, so we have it for history, as well as we could look at some of those tonight. But I might just share my screen just to kind of show the, if you don't mind, show the Jamboard for those who maybe haven't been over there, so it's not so mysterious. But I think we've gotten some great things when we think about the estuary in 10 to 20 and cleaned. You see a lot of great ideas here of people have thought about enjoying it, have the natural area not disturbed. And so continue to add those as you. I do want to just show the very last page of, as people are thinking about future from.
Whoops, did we lose Dave?
I am here.
You are here. Let me try to share the Jamboard.
Sounds good.
Let me see if it'll let me. Here's the question.
But maybe while we're doing this, if you don't mind putting in the chat how you felt like the engagement, this engagement pilot worked out, that would be great. We'd love to hear how this worked.
All right. So this is our first one. Do you want to just go to the last one, Dave? Is that what you said?
That's where I was. Yeah, that's where I was just talking about when I crashed.
Sorry. Well, we can also, I think the idea is we could leave this Jamboard active too. So I think if folks had wanted to come back, you know, in the future and kind of add different thoughts and stuff, that would be something that you could do. Oh, that's a good one. It's a lot of ways people using the estuary like that. Nice.
I also want to know, Scott also helped kind of answer some questions in the last slide. So if people want to go there and also see, you know, where you can find more information about the remedial action plans. And I also posted those questions from the chat. So we'll have those to consider how we can answer them best for you in the future meetings. I don't know if Heather, Scott, Cheryl, if you saw questions you wanted to answer today in the chat, otherwise we can hold off till next time.
I think there's some there that can be answered. You know, maybe I'll go back to one of the first ones that was asked here. I think Heather, you should probably answer this one, but just with either dredging method, how do you keep disturbed contaminants from getting into the flow of the water and not being captured?
Sure. Yeah, very good question. And, you know, definitely an important part of implementing either process. It's a little different for either method. Mechanical dredging, you would install turbidity curtains around the area where you're dredging, sometimes as small as immediately around that area, called like a moon pool curtain. And it does contain those residuals while you're actively dredging in that area. With hydraulic dredging, you really have a lot less disturbed residuals entering the water column. It's one of the other benefits of hydraulic dredging. And with both methods, we'd be doing turbidity monitoring. So monitoring the particles as well as contaminants while we're actively dredging. And that's something that's monitored in real time. And if for some reason conditions are not right during the process, they will stop operations and evaluate the situation. But that monitoring is key to the process the entire time that we're doing dredging.
Thanks, Heather. I think that kind of flows into one other question here that maybe I'm going to try and tackle here. But it's just about the Lincoln Park cleanup and what prevents contaminants from moving downstream, that they think some happen from that cleanup. And I didn't work on that project, but most of the Lincoln Park cleanup was done in the dry, so with behind cofferdams, so there wasn't a lot of downstream transport. And then the other way Heather already talked about with turbidity monitoring is a way we track whether there's downstream transport that's of any significance. Another question here, Heather, is what happens to material in the dredge material facility? Does it just stay there forever?
Yes, it does. It is intended to stay forever in the DMMF. That is correct. Anything more to add to that, Scott? I think that's pretty cut and dry. That is the intent, is that it would stay in the DMMF.
Yep. No, I think that one's perfect. And then there's another question here, and I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this one, Heather, but they ask it directly to EPA. So I'll ask you anyway.
Sure.
What is the anticipated final use of the DMMF after it is full?
Okay, that is a good question. And, for EPA's role in this, we are going to be planning to put material in this DMMF, but this is a facility that would be owned and operated by the city of Milwaukee and Port Milwaukee. So I believe that decision, and I don't think that decision has been made, and there's probably a lot of things to weigh into that down the road, but that is a city question to be answered. So it is not EPA's facility.
Yeah, I would just say that the Community Advisory Committee too, I think, we realize that that's a common question that we've gotten from the community is, what is going to be the end use of the site? And so I think that is something that we're starting to have conversations with, with the city of Milwaukee, the Port Milwaukee, and, DNR and EPA and other partners as well, but just trying to figure that piece out. Knowing that it's going to take quite a while for the facility to be filled in. But, I think that I think it is important to have a conversation now about what we think the end use of that will be. So I think, there will be more opportunities to come to talk about that. At least we hope so.
Cool. I'm going to move on to another question here, and I think this is an easier one. It's on the JAM board, but the question is, why isn't the current facility able to handle the dredged material? It's not that it wouldn't be able to handle the material, it's just not big enough. There's a lot more contamination in the waterways than we can fit in the current facility, which is mainly utilized for navigation dredging. And so that's the need for the new facility. Heather, there's a comment in here on the JAM board as well about, where is it? Just that somebody's concern was there's just not enough happening in the Milwaukee AOC. I thought maybe you could address that.
Well, yeah, so there are a lot of projects in the works and that are in planning stages, not just for sediment projects, but as Cheryl mentioned, for habitat projects and addressing other BUIs or beneficial use impairments related to being able to use the beaches and other areas. So these projects take a long time to plan, unfortunately. So there may not seem like there's a lot of action right now, but if you look at that map, we have sampled over the past, intensively over the past 2 years, or really over the last 5 or 6 years throughout the Milwaukee Estuary to pinpoint exactly where we have contamination, how deep is it, what's the best way to remove it. And we will need to be working on this planning phase, design phase for the next several years. So it does take a long time to get these things through to actually doing the cleanup work. But these are very expensive projects. We want to know exactly what we need to remove. We don't want to remove clean material. So it may seem like there's not a lot happening, but they're really, hopefully, as you get to understand and are presented with a lot more of the details of the projects going on in the AOC through these meetings and other information from the WRP, we'll get a more of a sense of all that's really happening. So I hope that answered that question well. I don't know if Cheryl or Scott or David, anything else to add?
Yeah, I would just say that, I think we didn't really get into like the beneficial use impairments, and because it can get a little bit wonky, but we have 11 of these beneficial use impairments, but essentially a lot of them are tied to the dredging and the well, the fact that we have all of this contaminated sediment that is affecting the benthos, is affecting, the macroinvertebrates, the life at the bottom of the rivers, which affects the fish, which affects everything else. And so I think, we know that, 7 of these impairments that we have really are tightly tied to removal of those contaminated sediments. So I think the idea is that we know that's not going to be, that's only, it's a very big and expensive item. But then after that work is done, I think certainly there is a lot of planning and design and engineering, and will be much more going forward to construct a lot of the habitat projects. There's about 20 roughly ballpark habitat projects that are in different levels of design and planning. A couple have been constructed already, some of our habitat projects. But there's a lot of work going on, and I think a lot of work that still needs to be planned. There's work being planned along the beaches as well, and how to improve the days that those beaches are open to make sure that they're safe and swimmable. And then I think a lot of talks that probably still need to happen on things like eutrophication, our sediment and kind of nutrient issues in particular. And some of those conversations are happening with other AOCs as well, because someone posted a question about research and science, and there's certainly a lot of research that's happening throughout the area of concern program in Wisconsin and beyond. And so I think we're also hoping to take advantage of a lot of that. But there is a lot going on, and I think, as Heather mentioned, hopefully if folks can go to that website, and then I think as you'll see with new opportunities that are popping up here, I think there's going to be a lot going on in the next 5+ years.
I kind of have a related question, I think, to this. There's a question on the Jamboard: is the plan and its estimated budget fully funded already by various state and federal funds, or is some of the work dependent on getting funding?
I can speak to that. As we're in the planning phases, we sort of have placeholders, or we understand that there is a tremendous sediment project to be implemented, a few years out. And we are anticipating that there will be Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding for the federal portion of this project. Also, we now have the ability, as Cheryl mentioned, to use bipartisan infrastructure law money on this project as well. So it may be a combination of those funds or one or the other. And as we get what's called a Legacy Act project agreement in place, that will designate that we, as long as we can move forward and get to the point of performing the cleanup, that we will have funding available. Now, I should say our Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding, we don't know what that's going to be every year, but we're anticipating, if we have similar funding that we've had in past years, that we would be, that would be available for use. Or, as I mentioned, it could be infrastructure money.
There's one question about the main chemicals of concern this cleanup will address. Scott, do you want to talk about that really quickly?
Sure. So the main chemicals of concern that'll be addressed are legacy pollutants from past industry. That includes PCBs, or polychlorinated biphenyls, which is a bioaccumulative compound, PAHs, or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and then a variety of metals such as lead, mercury, cadmium, and chromium. So those are the main contaminants of concern. I'd also like to address a question in the chat here that someone's referenced the Thames River in England, and that resulted in the return of fish and wildlife that hadn't been seen in hundreds of years, and that happen here. I can't say if wildlife we haven't seen in a really long time is going to be there, but I can say that for the cleanup that was done in Cedar Creek, DNR fisheries biologists went out there and did see a really great response from the fish and other wildlife that were there. So I don't know what exactly would come back, but I think we could expect a good recovery in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and I just say we've had a really good recovery just from like dam removal and a lot of the good work that's happened already to minimize sewage overflows and stormwater runoff. And, I think my understanding from talking to some of the DNR fish folks, and this, I'm not entirely sure if this stat's super up to date, but I know that, back in the day, we had like 4 species of fish in the Milwaukee River, and we've gotten up to, like well over, I think well over several dozen, like over 35, 40 species of fish down there now. So, I think that there's already been huge improvements in the last, some decades. And I think hopefully we'll be able to, I think certainly a lot of these projects are really focused on making sure we can return native fish to other portions of the watershed, like northern pike, and then also, sturgeon, which there's been some really wonderful reintroduction efforts by DNR and River Edge and a lot of really great partners, and starting to see some of those sturgeon kind of coming back up the river now. So I think certainly all of the pieces are there. We just need to kind of get all of the work done.
Looks like there's a couple of comments on the Jamboard and here that are both due to basically climate change and severe weather for the DMMF. And I think that that'll probably be the subject of a future public outreach event that can have more meat on it. But I can say that the design of the DMMF did incorporate climate change by looking at historical weather patterns, predicted future weather patterns, lake levels, ice, increased temperatures, and changes in precipitation, all of which were incorporated into a site-specific model of the wave events on the DMMF, and they were all incorporated, and the facility would be protective through anticipated changes in the climate. So I think that's a subject for a future public meeting where we can provide more slides on what exactly those things were looked at. And then I do see a comment about PFAS in here. Is it going to be monitored? So the DNR did a special study about PFAS in 2019. We went around and sampled surface water and sediment, and some of the additional sampling has been done since then. So that has been monitored. It's likely to be part of a future WIPD's permit that would be monitored into the future. And I think that's about what I can say on that topic for now.
There's a question about RFPs for infrastructure work for the new facility, which I'm thinking that they're talking about the DMMF.
Yeah, so that question would go to MMSD, and there aren't any RFPs right now, but there should be some by the end of this year.
Maybe a related question too is about jobs and opportunities for local workforce. Will there be any workforce development or job training opportunities related to this dredging project?
That's a better question for MMSD. Heather or anybody else on here that can handle that one? That's not one I can speak to.
Yeah, that is a good question. And I think, certainly for DMMF, be a question for MMSD. And, we don't have anything planned at this time for job share or job training opportunities, but it is something we'll discuss and plan to bring up on future calls.
If I could real quick, this is Rebecca with DNR, and there actually is a workforce group. And Benji, that might have been you chiming in, so maybe I'll pause and let you chime in if you were about to. I'll be quiet a sec.
Rebecca, it's Pete. So no, you go
perfect.
ahead.
Nope, go ahead, Pete. Go ahead.
So it was a really good question, and I appreciate it about workforce involvement. There is a area concerned work group that's been looking at worker and contractor engagement so that we can really maximize our local spend, utilize local firms to the extent possible, and local workers. When the contracts do go out for bid, there'll be a supplier diversity component where we'll require over 20% of the participation ideally to be performed by certified small women minority-owned businesses. As it concerns local workforce requirements, we also generally put several different types of requirements on contractors to utilize local workers. And two of those are, we'll ask the contractors to make sure they're using workers not only from our sewer service area, basically our ratepayers, but also targeted areas that target their 16 low-income zip codes of our region. The second is we want to make the most of utilizing new entrants to the construction trades, apprentices. And so there'll be a local workforce requirement that specifies the minimum number of hours that should be worked by apprentices on the project. Given that these are our goals and requirements that we'll be placing on the contractors, we've already begun some engagement with contractors that we think will be bidding on this project, and we'll be doing some more information sessions in the future. Hope that answers the question. Rebecca, is there anything that you wanted to emphasize that I didn't touch on?
Nope, that was perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Looks like there's a question here about the third ward project on the harbor front. This person is concerned with the cleanup method, that it will be disruptive, potentially cause damage to the structure. We've asked pollution be encapsulated adjacent to our building, but engineers are telling us the DNR will not consider this option. Is that true? That's not fully true because there is capping that's going on adjacent to the third ward project. Some of the material will be capped behind a sheet pile wall and a cap on top of that. And then the material that will be removed is adjacent to the navigation channel. But there are more specific discussions that are happening for that project in the future.
Okay, do we have any other lingering questions here? Yeah, I will say there are like some additional pages here too. So if we're getting a little bit jumbled on page 7 here, folks can put stuff on the other pages. And I will say we're kind of getting close here to time or a little bit over. So, I think we will leave this Jamboard open if folks think of other questions and things, topics that you want to have covered at future meetings, feel free to come back and add more thoughts to these. Dave, is there anything else?
No, just thank everyone for participating and looking forward to our next conversation. And you saw the websites. If you want, please do go visit and leave a contact if you'd like to follow up on other meetings. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. Yeah, and again, there's more information at the mkewaterwaypartners.org. And then if you want to contact any of the project partners, you can do that at wrp@mkewaterwaypartners.org. You can also contact info@MilwaukeeEstuaryAOC.com. And I think Christina's on here, but I'm sure we'll send you all of this in an email. You're not gonna be able to remember any of these, but we'll send you all the contact information and pertinent information about the upcoming meetings in an email, probably in the next day or so. And I think with that, thanks so much to Heather and to Scott and Dave and all the presenters. And thanks to all of you for taking an hour out of your time tonight. We really appreciate your time. And yeah, hope to see you at subsequent meetings. And again, plenty of opportunities to still get involved and ask questions and hopefully, shape these projects moving forward. So we hope to be able to involve as many people as possible.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.